This happened to me a few years ago while I was still in college, but I've been watching a ton of narrated true stories on YouTube and felt compelled to share my own experience. For some context, I'm Irish and was studying in the UK to get my bachelor's degree. I don't know how common this is elsewhere, but where I lived, it seemed to be common enough that landlords renting to students privately would convert the front downstairs room into an extra bedroom. This is where my bedroom was for my first year. I didn't mind it too much, but it was a bit weird having the front door directly in my room, and especially since, for those who aren't familiar with terraced houses in the UK, there isn't a front garden usually, and we just had a small section separating the front door from the path outside. By now, I'd been living here for a few months, and I could recognize the difference in the sound of someone walking past on the path and the sound of someone stepping towards the front door. On the night that this happened, I was totally alone in the house, as both of my housemates were away home for the weekend. This was a little unusual, since neither of them usually went home except for special occasions, but I think it might have been Valentine's Day around that time or something similar. It was about 1 a.m. in the morning, and I was lying in bed and on the phone to my boyfriend at the time as we were a long distance. While we were talking, I could hear some footsteps outside, and I immediately recognized that it was someone right outside the door. I kept listening and could just hear them shuffling around a bit. Then they started fumbling with the door handle. That spooked me, and I told my boyfriend that I was going to have a quick look out the window to see if I could spot whoever it was. I get up and part the curtains, and quite literally pressed my face and hands against the window to get a look outside, since it was pitch black by now and the streetlights had been turned off. It took a second then for me to realize what I was looking at, but whoever it was who was outside was doing the exact same thing that I was, pressed up against the window and staring in at me, only inches away. I didn't scream. I just felt as if all the wind had been knocked out of me, and I remember feeling like someone had just dunked me into a pool of ice water. Whoever it was looked to be male. I couldn't see his face properly, but I just remembered he was wearing a hoodie. He ran when he saw me, and after trying to collect myself, I quickly told my boyfriend, then called the police. I don't remember how long it took for them to get there. There wasn't a whole lot they could do. I think they might have done a quick patrol of the area, but nothing ever came of it. It was absolutely one of the most terrifying things that's happened to me, and I can't figure out at all why he was trying to break in. At that time, I had my light on, which would have been visible from the window even with the curtains drawn, so I figured I could rule out that he was a junkie or squatter looking for a place to crash. I don't know if maybe he'd been watching me and my housemates for a while, seeing 3 girls living alone, and thought maybe this would make an easy burglary, or worse. But thank God I didn't have any trouble again afterwards. I couldn't sleep for days after that. I remember staying up until the early morning, watching movies on my laptop to feel less alone until I would fall asleep from exhaustion once it started to get light outside. Since I was here from Ireland, I didn't even have any family members close by who I could call or go stay with, and it was the most agonizingly long weekend of my life waiting for my housemates to come back. I definitely think I've developed a slight phobia now of looking out the window while it's dark outside. This story happened more than 10 years ago when I was still a student. Full discretion, it does have graphic details of violence and animal harm, so discretion is advised. A bit of backstory. As with most students, I was always broke and had a few ventures apart from my part-time job to bring me extra money. One of them was house and pet sitting. I've always had a love for animals, so when this couple contacted me to ask them to house sit for the last few days before their return from their overseas trip, as their last sitter had bailed on them and their 6-month-old golden retriever puppy would be alone, I jumped at the opportunity. The fact that they promised to pay me the full 2-week fee for staying there for less than a week made it even more appealing. Little did I know how bad it would turn out. I got the details, got the keys from the agent, and headed over to the house, as it was already after 5 p.m. and almost dark. It was early spring. I got to the house, which was a really nice place, but it bordered a not so good area that was and still is prone to crime. House break-ins, robberies, etc. Didn't bother me much because, nothing will happen to me. At least that's what I thought, being young and naive. The first 4 nights went without a hitch. watching movies, jacuzzi, and just generally enjoying myself. The owners would have returned on the 5th day, fairly late at night. I went over to check on the dog. I got a call from them about 10 p.m. saying that their flight got delayed, they were going to stay in a hotel and do the 3.5-hour drive back the following morning. They asked if I could sleep there again that night. It was fine to me, I was already there, and I had my overnight bag still in my car. I called my dad to let him know of the plans, as I was still staying with my parents at that time, and he specifically asked what the address was. I normally didn't give out details like that because I was old enough to look after myself. I still believe to this day that giving my dad that information probably saved my life. I eventually got to bed about 1 a.m., and it felt like I'd only slept 5 minutes when I was awoken to a window breaking, and I could hear movement and what sounded like footsteps running down the hallway. The first thing I did was grab my phone and hit redial, as my dad was the last number that I had called, hoping that he would wake up from the phone. I then dropped the phone in between the headboard and mattress in case my dad picked up so that he could hear what was going on. I had barely done that when the first guy stormed through the bedroom door. I could see his silhouette, and he had a knife in his hand. When he saw me, he raised it and came at me. Now, one thing to those that are unfamiliar with South Africa and the crime is that robberies and house invasions usually are very brutal and violent. People get murdered or tortured if they retaliate in the slightest or don't cooperate with the robbers. Out of instinct, I raised my legs back when he came at me, and when he came within reach, I kicked both legs out as hard as I could. No, I'm not a small guy. I'm 6'3", and at that stage I weighed about 100 kilos or 220 pounds, and I was fit and strong. My time not spent at school or work was at the gym. I could do an easy 250-pound bench, 350-pound squat. When I kicked and made contact with the guy, he completely lifted off the ground and shot into the wall. Luckily, the knife shot out of his hand as well. Before he got the chance to get up, I was on top of him, driving my right knee into his face, and in return, his head into the wall. I knew that my life depended on it, so I put in some extra force. The guy dropped like a sack of potatoes, but before I could get up, I heard the sound of a pistol cock and I froze. It felt like all the blood drained from my body, and I became numb. I remember the only thing that went through my head was that if he shot me, I would rather die than be disabled or dependent on other people that would have to take care of me. He stood like that with the pistol against my head for what felt like hours, but it was probably less than 10 seconds. I didn't move, and he eventually said in very broken English to get on the bed face down. I panicked, but thought if he wanted to shoot me, that he would have already done so. So I did as he said. He threw a blanket over me, and I turned into a fetal position with my back against the wall, just so if they wanted to stab me, that I had my legs and arms in front to protect my body. By that time, I had already forgotten that I called my dad, and the guy that I had kneed was still down. I heard a third guy come into the room, and I could hear what sounded like Portuguese to me. I couldn't understand what they said, but I recognized it, as we used to go to Mozambique on holiday a lot, and that's the main language spoken there. The one guy tried to get the guy that I put down off the ground, while the other started to ransack the house, shoving valuables into a big bag. It was about at this time that I heard tires screeching and a car approaching at what sounded like Mach 1. The car skidded to a halt right in front of the gate, and I heard someone scream. It was my dad. The three inside the house panicked and ran out the back door and tried to jump the fence. My dad opened fire, shooting in their general direction. Now I know my dad missed them on purpose, because if he wanted to hit them, he would, as he is not one of, but the best shot that I know. Now I'm not just saying that because he's my dad. He's ex-Army Special Forces, represented South Africa in the Clay Pigeon World Championships for a few years. He has various regional pistol and rifle championship titles and is a gunsmith by occupation. I've seen him hit golf balls at 50 meters with his pistol. Politics and the racial situation in the country would have had him in big trouble had he hit one of them. I grabbed the house keys and pressed the gate remote. My dad called the police while he came in. I met him at the front door and he walked out to the car there for the police. It took them over an hour to get there, some excuse of no vehicles being available. By that time, I had calmed down and started to look for the dog. I couldn't find her anywhere. I grabbed a flashlight from my dad and started scanning the surrounding yard. As I got to the corner, I could see her laying on the ground. When I got closer, I saw that she was dead. Later autopsies revealed that she was poisoned, and the police found pieces of meat laced with poison near the fence. Poisoning is pretty standard practice in my country for dealing with dogs at a house or an area that is targeted for a break-in or robbery. I was fuming and so sad. The police were also pretty useless and had a don't care attitude. They barely took our statements. By that time, it was starting to get light outside, and I retrieved my bag, phone, and locked the house as good as I could without touching anything. I drove home behind my dad. Only when I got home did I get the story from my dad's side. He said he answered my call, only to hear the shouting and what sounded like fighting going on, and when I didn't respond, he flew out of the house and raced over. Luckily, he asked me for the address the previous night, and he knows the area well to know exactly which house it is. Now, my dad got there pretty quickly, and he stayed online the whole time, only hanging up when he stopped at the gate. My parents' house is about 10 kilometers or 6 miles from there through a residential area. It's normally about a 20-minute drive. The call duration was 7 minutes and 13 seconds. I met the detective there later that day, gave my statement, they took fingerprints, and the owners got back around the same time. The rest of the day was a blur as I came down from the shock and adrenaline. This isn't where the story ends. About 7 or 8 months later, I got a call from the detective telling me they caught the guys and I must come to a lineup to point them out. I specifically told her that I didn't see any of their faces as it was dark, and after the guy held the gun against my head, I was under the blanket and didn't see anything. She assured me that they caught them on fingerprints and would show them to me beforehand, which might not be ethically correct way, but they wanted to have as much evidence as possible against them. You'll understand why in a minute. I got to the police station, and unlike you see in the movies, there's no one-way glass or separate room here. They bring the 3 guys into a room and make them stand against the wall. The one which I was later told was the leader was the one that I had kneed in the face. He looked at me with so much hate that I had never seen in my life. He had the eyes of someone that would slit your throat and not blink an eye. His name was Joseph Dragon Sambo. He pulled his hand up to his neck and made the slit my throat gesture. You know which one I mean. We left the room, and the detective gave me a copy of his rap sheet. Amongst others, 4 counts of murder, I think 8 to 9 for attempted murder, multiple assault, aggravated assault, over 100 charges of house breaking in and robbery, and SA. Needless to say, I was shocked. The detective told me that had I not taken him out first and fast that night, I would have definitely not gotten away so lightly. This is also not where the story ends. 3 days later, I get another call from the detective, saying that I should be careful as he had escaped from custody and they had not caught him yet. I wasn't worried too much as the robbery wasn't at my house and I had changed cars, so he probably couldn't find me. Also, I got my firearm license and carried my pistol on me 24/7. I didn't hear anything after that until about 2 years later when I saw the detective in the grocery shop. We started talking about the case, and she told me that he was killed during a home invasion. He broke into the wrong house and the owner was waiting for him, pistol in hand, shot him in the stomach and one in the neck. Thanks to the slow response time of emergency services and police, he bled out on the guy's living room floor, ridding society of a piece of human garbage. This whole ordeal has made me more vigilant, heightened my situational awareness, and made me a little paranoid to double and triple check all doors and locks. Also, thanks to my heightened situational awareness, it's allowed me to remove myself from a few potential dangerous situations in the years after the incident, but it's also robbed me of my peace of mind. I have since moved to a safer country, but I still sometimes wake up at night if I hear a noise. This story happened about 10 years ago when I was around 14. My sibling and I lived close to an elementary school. We would often go to walk our dog in the playing field and crop of woods. We would let our dog roam around while we played on the playground or played in the woods. The schoolyard had a playing field, a playground near the building, and a playground further away from the building and a crop of trees. We were swinging on the swing set at this more distant playground, but from this play area, you can clearly see residential streets and the parking lot of the school, which kind of all wrap around the crop of forest. As we're swinging, I see an SUV drive up one of the roads and pull into the parking lot. It's a weekend, so there's no other cars around and not very many people. Maybe the odd passerby also walking their dog. The SUV is about 40 meters or 130 feet from where we were, and I was wearing glasses. I can't see very well what the people look like as they exit the car, but I can see some distinct pieces of clothing. There's 3 people. 2 look older and are dressed as if they were middle-aged, maybe in their 50s. I remember one of them was wearing a wide-brimmed woman's sun hat. The third person looks like an older teen or young adult in his 20s and is wearing a green and white striped jersey and cleats. It's not uncommon for people to walk or drive to the school to use its field for play or sport practice. Though looking back now, I realize it's odd they parked in this slot and not on the side of the road nearer to the field, which is on the opposite side of the property. In any case, I think, okay, just some grandparents and their grandson going to practice in the field, and I go about playing with my sibling. I remember watching the trio walk away around the school building, completely opposite to where we were on the property. We have our dog with us, and after a time we decide to stop swinging and take the dog on a walk through the trails in the forest. Maybe 15 to 20 minutes pass since the car pulled up. The brush that we're walking in is basically in the very corner of the school property. There's a metal chain link fence in front of us, and beyond it is the sidewalk and residential road. To our right is another fence which separates people's backyards from the school grounds. These homes all have tall trees growing along the school fence for added privacy, so it's almost impossible for anyone to see into the schoolyard. My sibling and I were just at that age where playing pretend didn't really feel genuine and spur of the moment, like we were about to grow out of it. I was feeling bored but didn't want to go home yet, so I pick up a branch of those red berries that grow in the schoolyard and I say to my sibling, "Hey, want to play a game?" Which was our code for "let's play pretend." I bend down to offer the berries to my dog as a starting point for the game. I'm still speaking to my sibling who's walking in front of me as I bend down, but my voice trails off as I see my dog's behavior. She's completely ignoring the berries and me, and instead moving past me slowly, ears back and nose pointed, as if she's approaching something. I follow her movement, still looking down. When I finally look up, there are the 3 people from the SUV, not 6 feet away from me. There's certainly not a couple of grandparents and a kid, but 3 grown men. I remember the faces of the 2 older men pretending to be grandparents. The foremost man had short white hair and a white scruff of facial hair. His mouth was open in a faint O shape as he breathed quietly and focused on keeping his steps light. The other man was extremely thin, his cheekbones popping out and shoulder-length greasy brown hair hung around his skeletal features. They had crept up behind my sibling and I silently and remained just as quiet as they all turned their backs quickly and pretend to point off into the trees like they were bird watching or something. It was bizarre how silent the whole encounter was. I immediately realized we need to get the hell out of there. I turned my attention back to my sibling as I grab my dog's collar and get her hooked up to the leash. My sibling is about a foot away from me, but seems oblivious still to the 3 creeps in the woods right behind us. I tell them over and over that we need to leave, but they've become wrapped up in the imaginary game I promised to play moments ago. Finally, they see the men. I never looked back at the creeps, only to my sibling, who also stops talking and starts walking with me. Thankfully, an opening in the fence between these now haunted woods and the road is only a few meters ahead. We get some distance and obstacles between us and these creeps. To my frustration, my sibling wants to stop on the sidewalk and pick some more berries through the fence, and I frantically tell them to come on, let's go. I still never look back towards the men, my vision tunneling to the safety of the open roads and sidewalks and homes in front of us. We get home without incident, at least to my knowledge. Had the men followed us on foot, gone back to their car and followed, or simply gave up? I didn't care, I just wanted to get home, which was only a couple blocks away. When we got home, I broke down. I told my mom what happened, and I remember her reaction being kind of nonchalant. I had always been an anxious child, and she developed a habit of downplaying things in a kind of exposure therapy way. I realized I still didn't feel fully safe with this reaction and retreated to my basement to cry alone. In recounting the story with my mom years later, she said she did call the police but nothing came of it. I'm also very thankful for my dog, as it's likely she saved the lives of myself and my sibling that day. In the years since then, I became highly skilled in reading people's body language. I can tell when someone is lying. I can read people's emotions and intentions like a book. I can tell if someone's vibe is off from a good distance away. This has become a blessing and a curse.